Hi, welcome. It's Friday. Actually, it's Friday the 13th. And I thought before we discussed our readings for today that I'd take a moment, since maybe you've asked this question before. Where did Friday the 13th come from? Why do we consider it as a superstition to be something unlucky? Well, I took the liberty of doing a little bit of research here, and let me share with you just a couple of things. Actually, it's not that old when you think of history. There is no evidence for a Friday the 13th before the 19th century. In fact, the first documented evidence that can be found was recorded in 1869. Just one note, there are actually 3 Friday the 13ths in 2012. We had one in January, we have one here in April, and we'll have another one in July. The theory, though, is that Friday the 13th is actually 2 superstitions put together. Number 1, that 13 is an unlucky number, and number 2, that Friday is an unlucky day. And so you put the 2 together and it has some special effect. Obviously, when you think of numerology, and certainly those of us who from a scriptural standpoint think about that, 12 has always been considered a number of completeness. There are many, many 12s in our lives and in the world. You think of 12 months out of the year, 12 hours on the clock, 12 gods of Olympus, 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples of Jesus. There are actually 12 successors of Muhammad in Shia Islam as well. Now, if 12 is considered complete, 13 then is considered kind of irregular, off, and therefore something that is not right and that we should kind of be a little bit nervous about. And in fact, there's a superstition that it comes actually from the Last Supper, where you had the 12 disciples and Jesus. 13 people at a table is bad and will result in the death of one of the diners. And of course we understand that that was Judas in that case. Ultimately it was Jesus who died the next day. Friday has been considered an unlucky day since the 14th century, and so a lot of things people take into that are we don't do things, we worry more on Friday the 13th. Stock market crashes happen on Friday the 13th, and Jesus was crucified on Friday the 13th. So a number of things related to Friday the 13th as to where that came from and the superstition. Not that old, kind of grew over the years. There's not really a whole lot of evidence to support certainly that there's anything different or special about it, other than what people make of it. So that's that. Today, of course, in our readings, God rejects Saul. And Saul tries to justify his actions. Ultimately, Saul is sad about it. God regrets putting Saul in charge, and Saul ultimately seeks God's forgiveness. And it's not that God rejects Saul. He does, though, reject Saul as king anymore. And I think that's important to understand, that when God says he regretted making Saul king, he did have a change of mind. He didn't think it was a mistake, but God places us into positions all the time, and I think Saul had an opportunity here. There's something dynamic in this relationship that God has with his children that says, you know what, I'm going to give you the opportunity to serve, to grow, to lead. I'm going to empower you, but we still have to take hold of it. Saul still needed to step up to the plate, and clearly he wasn't up to the task. And God says, that's fine, I forgive you, but you cannot be king anymore. You need to pick up the pieces and go on to something else. And so then we move on in chapter 16, God's warning Samuel, and this is probably the key reference in this entire reading today. As we've read this before over and over, if Saul was this tall, impressive guy that people looked at and were impressed by when they saw him, God is saying, I don't look at those outward appearances, I look at the inward appearances. He says there in chapter 16, I look on the inside, I don't judge by the outside. And so when he measures somebody, he measures the heart. He measures those qualities. And I got to thinking about the fact that the NFL football draft is coming up in a couple of weeks. And in the midst of all of the tests and things that these athletes are taking athletically, the one thing that scouts and coaches struggle with the most is all these guys are good athletes. All of them are the cream of the crop. Physically, they all have the skills. What they can't figure out is what's on the inside. What's their heart? What's their motivation? What's their desire? Those kinds of things. And so they have all these interviews just trying to figure that out, because it's much harder to discern that. And in fact, as we know, God is the only one who can judge. He's the only one who can see the heart. And so there are a couple of things out of this that I think we should take. First, thankfully, God doesn't just judge by outward appearance like we do in our society. In fact, because we're so impressed by that, many of us spend lots of time worrying about our outward appearance, clothes, makeup, plastic surgery, or anything else. Thankfully, though, God looks at something much different. In the heart are those qualities of faith, the character issues, all those things, and that's what God really wants us to see and to start judging. Number one, in our own lives. And so there are two things here. Number one, we need to not judge other people. We need to accept them and to get to know them and really find out who they are before we make assessments about their abilities or their character or anything else. Number two, for us personally, we need to spend more time on the inward kinds of things. We spend so much time worrying about the outward things. What about the inward elements of our lives, our faith, and our character? Those are the things that God would say we need to work on. We need to pay attention to. And as we do that, then God's Spirit works within us. And so how about a little work on our character today as we go through this day? And not worry about others, but rather improve our attitudes, our heart, our thoughts, and see how that influences the way we view and look at others. And as we move on, tomorrow we'll really begin to dig into our next king, which we know is King David. So we'll look forward to that. Hope you have a great day.